What's going on, my dear kumquats? Welcome back to another video. Today is not any Nintendo video content. Today we actually have board game content. And I know what you're thinking, Eric, this is a Nintendo channel. This should be about Nintendo stuff. Well, I have some news for you. Nintendo is on a little bit of a hiatus right now. So, to supplement the lack of content from Nintendo that I can talk about, I'm going to start talking about some other stuff that I'd like to talk about, which is board game content. And the game I'd like to talk about is Smash Up, published by AEG, American Entertainment Group, and designed by Paul Peterson. And as you can probably tell by the box art, the game is about smashing up factions of all different types of factions. You got aliens, you got dinosaurs, you got wizards, pirates. Honestly, with all the different expansions that this game has, there's so many different combinations. The basics of the game is breaking a base awards you points. So there will be base cards, and then you are using your factions that you've smashed up, and you're trying to break the base and get 15 victory points to win the game. So what I'm going to show you today is how to play the game. After which, I'm going to produce videos that show you how each faction works and what other factions work best with that faction. So if you're interested, click that subscribe button and hit that bell for future video notifications. And with that said, let's get to the table and show you how it's played. Alright guys, let's talk about how to play Smash Up. Now, there are really just 3 types of cards in the base game of Smash Up. Now, hence I did say base game. So later on you will see that there are different cards, and I will mention that in this video. But in the base game there are really only 3 cards. There are the minion cards, which I did say earlier on in the video that I will be doing faction videos. So like after this how to play video, you'll see like a faction video based on the pirates, which I'm going to be using them as an example today. But I'm not going to go into too much detail, but just how to play the game, we're going to use the pirates as an example. So you have minion cards, which will go over the minions in a deck, and you also have action cards. So every single faction in Smash Up is going to be a 20 card deck. Half of those generally are minions, and then half of those are generally actions. I say generally because not all factions are equally distributed. So, for example, in the pirate deck, and I apologize for the lighting, still trying to figure this setup out, but so I'm just going to apologize for that in advance. In a typical Smash Up deck, you usually have 4 minions of power level 2, which in this case is the first mate. You have 3 minions of power level 3, which in this case is the Sussy Wench. And coming up next, you got 2 power 4 level minions here, which are the Buccaneer, and then of course the Big Daddy, the Pirate King. Definitely One Piece inspired. No, just kidding. You only have 1 level 5. Now that is the general, or I don't know what the word would be. It's not general. It's kind of just the standard. It's usually like the standard way Smash Up decks are kind of revolved around. You have 4 of your level 2s, 3 level 3s, 2 level 4s, and then 1 power level 5. And as I said, initially you're going to be using your minions to take over bases. So I'm going to scoot these over to the side here and try to keep them in frame. So in the base deck of Smash Up, I have just a few examples of the bases that are in here. So this is what, like I said, this is one type of card that you'll deal with in Smash Up are the minions. The other type, like we said, are the actions, which we'll talk about later. And then the third one, we have the bases. And the bases, these are how you're going to be awarded points. So I will go to a typical setup of Smash Up here in a second, but just to go over what the bases do is you have the name of the base, which is in this case is the homeworld, which is the alien faction inspired, right? You have the points that are awarded based on first place, second place, third place. And in the top left, you have the number of how much power needs to be on that base. So from your minions, or it even could be from actions as well. Your minions, your actions, other players' minions and actions. Once on this base, it's been 23 or over, the base will then be scored, and whoever has the most power at that base will be awarded first place, which in this case is 4 points, second place 2, and so on. On each base, for the most part, there are, there's a couple bases that don't have this, but most of them have an ability here on the base. So this base says, after each time a minion is played here, its owner may play an extra minion of power 2 or less. So if this base was down, for example, I'm playing the Pirates, I play 𝐓𝐡𝐢𝐬 on the home world. Well, the ability says I can play a power 2 level minion or less if it's the after you play a minion here, and so I played the 𝐓𝐡𝐢𝐬, I can play the first mate. So now I have a total of 5, sorry I bumped the camera, 5 on the home world. So yeah, that's basically the basics. Let's get on to what a typical setup will look like with 3 players. Okay, and to set up a game of 3 players, you set out the bases, you shuffle the base deck, and you put out bases equal to the number of players plus 1. So if we're playing a 3-player game, we have 1, 2, 3 bases plus 1. So you set up the bases, all the players should have picked 2 factions, and you shuffle the factions together. And so in this case, I'm going to take Pirates, and I got the Tricksters sitting next to me, so I'm going to take the Tricksters. I'll take these 2, shuffle them up, and then afterwards I am ready to go for the setup. So after you shuffle them up, each player takes their 40 card deck, right? Because each faction has 20 cards in each deck. You draw 5, so I'm going to take 5. Looks like I didn't really shuffle very well there. I did get a Trickster card there. So you take 5 cards, and the rule is if you do not have any minions in your hand, you reveal your hand, you can discard it and draw a new 5. But in this case, I did grab 2 minions off my starting hand, which is the first mate and the Buccaneer. So you can do it differently. What I'm trying to say is you can do the starting picking factions in a different way, which usually if you want to make it competitive, you kind of like roll dice to see who goes first, and then they pick a faction, goes to the next player, they pick a faction, and then the last player to pick a faction gets to pick a second one, and then it goes all the way back around. It just tails back around. So and then whoever won the coin flip and picked the first faction would go first. So let's just say I'm going first for simplicity's sake. And on your turn, you can do one of 2 things. So you can do one of 3 things. Technically, you can do one of 4 things. Let's do the first thing first. You play a minion on a base wherever you would like. I'm going to choose to play my first mate. I'm going to choose to play the Buccaneer on the home world, because the ability says, like we talked about earlier, after each time a minion is played here, its owner may play a minion of power 2 or less. So usually on a tabletop setting, you're going to have a lot more space, but for recording's sake, I'm kind of just putting it like this. Usually they're kind of like this on your side of the table or whatever, but for simplicity and space sake, I'm just going to do it like this. So using the homeworld's ability, I also put the first mate down like that, and we have to take note of abilities on your minions. So some abilities happen when you play it, some happen you proc them, which are called talents, which come later in another set, which we'll talk about with Titans at the end of the video. And then some of them are special, and they say here special. So this probably happens before a base scores, after a base scores. When your opponent does something, you can play the card as a special, and you can do it out of turn. So in this case, it says after the base is scored, you may move this minion to another base inside the discard pile. So the first mate's really just going to be floating around. If you have all 4 of those first mates, you pretty much got, what is that, 2, 4, 6, 8. You've got 8 power just floating around to other bases, unless they get destroyed, which is another thing we can talk about. So, here we go, we got the Buccaneer that says special. If this minion would be destroyed, so another player essentially killing your Buccaneer, going to the discard pile, you can move it to another base. So First Mate and Buccaneer, they sound like they do the same thing, but they really don't. The Buccaneer is going to be able to go from base to base if it would be destroyed by another player. The First Mate sticks around as long as it doesn't get destroyed by other players, but after a base scores. So it's a little tricky to get those terms down, but after you get them down, it's pretty easy. So I played my minion for turn. I got to play an extra minion for turn because of the base. So that's the first action. You can play one minion per turn unless it says otherwise, which the homeworld let us do. Now I'm able to also play an action. So I have Disenchant, that says destroy an action that has been played on a minion or a base. So since I'm first and I didn't put any actions on my Buccaneer First Mate, this really is not going to do anything because I haven't played any actions. So not going to be a card I want to use right now. We got the Cannon, destroy up to 2 minions of power 2 or less. Again, I could destroy my First Mate if I wanted to, and there is merit to destroying your own minions in this game, but right now I don't want to do that. It'd be more of a detriment, and there's no other players there. There's no other players on the board, so Cannon's also going to be useless to me. And then we have the Dinghy. Move up to 2 of your minions to other bases. So I could move the Buccaneer and the First Mate right now. Maybe I wanted to use the Homeworld's ability, so I use the Buccaneer, boom, use the First Mate, boom. Now I want to move them to the Central Brain, for example. I don't know. But I kind of want to save that. It's kind of a good card to keep for turn. So like I said, you can play one minion per turn unless stated otherwise. You can play one action per turn unless stated otherwise. Some actions say play an extra action, for example, or bases will say play an extra action, or even a minion will say play an extra action. The details are all in the cards, you guys. So make sure you read what the cards say. What I love about this game is that for the most part, the text just tells you what you can and can't do. But the basics are you can only play one minion per turn, you can only play one action per turn, and then if you don't have anything that you want to play, you can do nothing and just pass. And when I was saying there's 4 things you can do, you can play a minion, or you can play an action, or you can play one of each. So that's 3, and then 4, you can do nothing. So after your turn's over, we check to see if there's any of these bases that have got to the break point in which then we would score, which of course there is not. We only have 6 on the home world, so it's far away from being broken. So in which case, if that doesn't happen, then we go ahead and draw 2 cards to end our turn. So we got the Gnome minion and we got the Flame Trap action. So now we can just look at our hand and plan ahead for next turn. So it would go to each player, and they would put minions out, and then you just go to your next turn. And then the first person to 15 victory points is the winner. So let's go ahead and take a look and see what it looks like when you score a base. Alright guys, I kind of just put minions on the board just to kind of show the example here, but let's just say this is one player, and this is me. I've got the Pirates and the Tricksters. And so, essentially, now that, let's just say one of my opponents just placed this Power 2 minion on their side to break the base. So, it's about to be the end of their turn, but before the end of the turn, you check to see if bases have been broken. So in this case, the homeworld has been broken here, and what you do is you add up the amount of power that you have to each player. So in this case, right, that my opponent has 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So they have 11 contributing power to this base. And then we have 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So that means that I would be awarded first place, so I would get 4 victory points. So that's 3 right there. So 4 victory points. And then my opponent would be awarded 2. And so you basically keep doing this, and then afterwards, the base has been scored. All of these guys go to the discard pile unless there are any specials, which you have to keep in mind. Say, are there any specials before the base, after the base? Keep that in mind. So remember, the first mate, after this base is scored, you may move this minion to another base instead of the discard pile. So I'll just say I want to move him to the Central Brain, and then after which all these guys are going to go to their discard pile, their owner's discard pile. These will go all to my discard pile. This base would go to the discard pile for the base deck, and then a new base would go here in place of it. And then you keep going until somebody gets 15 victory points. And once somebody does get 15, the game is immediately over. So yeah, and that's how to play. Now, I did mention that there are other types of cards that were added in later expansions. So I'm going to go over a couple of them. So let's talk about Titans first. So later on, there were Titans that were added to the game. The first one was the first set of Titans that were added was in the expansion called Big in Japan, and the decks kind of focused around the Titans. I really do like the Titans. They kind of help. They kind of help the decks that were kind of struggling, the factions that were struggling or towards the end of all these expansions. Which, by the way, as of the recording of this video, the next expansion that's going to be released is the Marvel. The licensed Marvel expansion that's coming out in summer of 2020. So we got a ton of different factions to talk about until then. But yeah, so anyways, these Titans kind of helped fill the gaps for some of the weaknesses the factions had. So the Pirates were given this Titan called the Kraken, and I'm sorry you can't read it because of the gloss finish here, but it has a special way to come into play. And remember, this is a Titan, it's not a minion, and it's not an action, so this wouldn't count towards your 1 minion per play. So it says, after a base scores where you had a minion while this card is not in play, this Titan, you may say, release the Kraken, and play this Titan on the base that replaces it. So essentially, after you have a base that scores and you were on that base, this guy can come to the new base that comes after you say release the Kraken, and then now it's in play. Now there's a new mechanic that also was added after the base game called Talent, and you can't really read this, so I apologize again. And it says, Talent, move this Titan to another base. Other players' minions there get -1 power until the end of the turn. So this is at the base that replaces it because it came into play, right? On your turn, you are able to proc, meaning you activate the power, the talent. You activate it. You will say, I'm going to use the talent. You move this to another base, and all other players' minions there get -1 power until the end of the turn. That's what that talent means, and that's what talents mean. So since we're on the topic of talents, I brought the Venus Mantrap from the Killer Plants faction, which has all it has is a talent. So it's not an action that comes into play, or it's not a minion action that comes into play. It's not a I'm saying action. It's actually a minion ability. It's not a minion ability that comes into play. It's a talent that when it's down on the board, you can proc it and use it once on your turn. And then when it comes back to your turn, you can use it again. So this one says, search your deck for a minion in power 2 or less and play it here as an extra minion. Shuffle your deck afterwards. So having this bad guy out, you get to search your deck, get a level, power 2, and then play it as an extra minion. Really great card. Awesome card. And then there's also another special ability at the bottom of the Kraken. It says, after the base scores that it is on, move one of your minions from here to another base instead of the discard pile. So essentially, you remember the first mate? Well, he's able to move to another base after a base score as well. After this guy that's on a base, you can save another one that might not be a first mate. So that's what that last one means, and it's a pretty cool Titan. I really do like the Kraken. So yeah, so that's Titans in a nutshell. There are many more, and when we go and talk about the separate factions, I will also, if they do have a Titan, I will talk about the Titan as well. So that's about it, guys. If you have any questions at all, leave them in the comment section. I will try to answer them as best as I can. And remember, if you are interested in learning any more about Smash Up, please hit the subscribe button. I'll be talking about every single faction, what are the best faction combinations for that faction, and yeah, we're just gonna get right down to the nitty-gritty. And until next time, we'll see you guys in the next one. Peace!